Now let's look at a brand new genre, happens in the Baroque period, that is big, 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 big. We are in the Baroque after all. We like things to be big and dramatic. What is more big and more dramatic than opera? So you can blame people from way back in 1600 for those of you who think you don't like opera, but hopefully we'll change your mind. So what is opera? Opera is a play. So it's got a storyline. It has characters. It's done on a stage. So we are wearing costumes. There's scenery. There's furniture, whatever's necessary for the story. There's an orchestra. The size of that orchestra is going to change over time and the instrumentation will change, but we have orchestra. Obviously, we have to have singers. But the thing about opera is that these singers also have to be actors. We have to believe that they are who they are. There are lots of wonderful, wonderful singers in the world who are just terrible actors. They don't make their living on the opera stage. They make their living in concert halls singing other things. So you've got to be a good actor, you've got to be a good singer. Those are the two first prerequisites for opera. Now, what do you think about when you think about opera? I know what you think, because I know what all my students tell me. They think big fat ladies with horns on their heads singing really loud and really high. And unfortunately, that's just a stereotype. There are roles like that. I mean, the picture that people have in their heads there, that's Brunhilde from one of the Wagner operas. But that's not really what opera is about. These days, if you go to the opera, it's unlikely that you're going to see a huge woman playing the 16-year-old character. Because today's audiences just will not buy that. We're just not going to take a 40-year-old woman singing a 16-year-old's part. It's not going to happen. For the most part, you will see people who look like the characters they're supposed to be. Back in the past, that might not have happened. You know, we went with the best singers. We didn't care if they looked like the characters they were supposed to be or not. So please put that image out of your head. I'm not going to show you any ladies with horns on their heads, although I might. They won't look like the ones in your picture, in your mental picture. So let's look at the other thing. When I talk to my students about singers in general, anything they hear that has a trained voice, as opposed to what they hear mostly on the radio, no matter what it is they're singing, they call it opera, because that's their mental image, is that sound means opera. That sound just means a trained voice, doesn't mean opera. Screechy voices, that's not opera either. My sister and I got to go to the Metropolitan Opera a couple of years ago, and she's not a musician, so she had never had any experience with that. And we were watching this opera, and at the intermission, she said, you know, that wasn't screechy at all. I was really surprised. So even my sister, who's, you know, related to a musician, thought that that's what opera singers were like. So it's not. Yes, the voices tend to be higher than what you're used to hearing, the female singers anyway. Even the male singers are singing higher than what most of what you hear. Keep in mind that they have to project. These people don't use microphones as a general rule. They're singing on a big stage with an orchestra, usually in a big building. They've got to be able to put the sound out. So, yeah, they're going to be loud, but they're not screechy. So just try to put away all your misconceptions about that. All right, so 1600, actually around 1607, Claudio Monteverdi, who was a madrigal composer for the most part, came up with this idea of opera. Opera in Italian just means work. It's the same word we get opus from that we use to identify pieces of music. So it just is a work, so it didn't really mean anything particular. What he did was take a mythological story that everybody in his circle would know, and that's the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. If you lived in the 1600s, you were familiar with these stories. So they were very good topics for opera. Everybody knows the story already. Therefore, we don't have to tell you every detail. It would be like today if you were, obsessed with some particular television show. You know all the characters and everything. You don't have to explain all their backstories and whatever. I could make an opera today about that, and I could leave out all that early bit because I would know that you as my audience already knows that stuff, and I can just get to the heart of the story. So they would take the important bits of the mythological stories, make them into opera. So in Orpheus and Eurydice, which is used in lots of operas actually, it appears in visual art all the time. This is the story of the man whose wife dies, He's a musician himself. His wife dies, goes to the underworld, and he goes there trying to bring her back. And the way he chooses to do that is to play beautiful music for the god of the underworld so he can bring his wife back out. And he succeeds in his mission, but the caveat is that he can't look back to see her until they've crossed back over to this side of the river. But of course, he loves her so much he just can't wait to make sure it's her, and it turns around, and then that's it. Now, that's kind of a typical mythological story. Things happen, and the endings are not always good. People turn into reeds in the river or whatever. Bad things happen. People in the Baroque era didn't necessarily want that ending. They're sort of like a lot of audiences today. They want the happy, lucky Disney ending for everything. So opera composers gave it to them. What they would do is tell the whole story. We'd get to the point where, like in this case, she's supposed to go back to the underworld because he's not done what he's supposed to. So how are we going to solve that? Because that's how the story goes. Well, what they would do is just come up with this thing called the Deus ex machina, the god of the machine. And so it might be that somebody would come out of the ceiling and fix everything, like, I can make this all better. Now, you think, gosh, that seems pretty high tech for 1600, doesn't it? Well, they were very much into their stage machinery, lights, pyrotechnic kinds of things. That's not anything new. They've been doing that for a very long time. And audiences really liked that sort of thing, to have those dramatic effects and have the cloud, things raining out of the sky and fires on the side and all sorts of things like that. So that's a pretty typical thing. You have a story, and then if it's not a good ending, we'll make it a good ending by using this Deus ex machina. So Monteverdi got us started with Orfeo, which is the Italian name for that particular opera. And it was very popular. It's just sort of steamrolled on. So who got to see these operas? Not you and me, for the most part. You had to know somebody. So maybe the court would put on an opera, and if you were a friend of the court, you could go. Or if you happen to be in tight with the Pope actually had a 3,000-seat theater. Say that 3 times fast. And that they would do operas there, so you could go see the opera there. It's not until the middle of the 1600s that we start seeing opera houses being built, and at that point, you and I could have bought one of the cheap seats and gone to see the opera. So we start with Monteverdi. Let's look at a couple of other composers from the period just to give us some ideas about what the music's like. Let's start with an English composer, Henry Purcell, or Purcell. People call him both ways. He was a composer, and obviously like to do some opera. The opera that he's most known for is called Dido and Aeneas, and it's based on a story from Virgil's Aeneid. So again, we're taking a story that everybody's supposed to know. All our well-educated friends know this story. Most of the operas we have seen up to this point would be sung by men. So all the parts would be sung by men. This particular one is different because of who he wrote it for. He actually wrote this opera for a girls' school. So we're in England. Think about boarding schools where the girls stay there all the time. They have a parents' day every year, and the parents come in and you showcase what your children have done, much like we do today with PTA meetings. So he wrote this little opera. It's only about an hour long for the girls at this school. So this is very different from most of what happens in opera in that time. It's all women singing. So even the men's parts are sung by girls because that was who it was written for. So in this opera, Dido is the female character. She is the queen of Carthage. And Aeneas has been sent to found the city of Rome. So that's his mission. He gets shipwrecked at Carthage and meets Dido, and of course they fall in love and all that sort of thing. So all's going along very nicely. They're in love and happy and all that. But then he realizes that the gods have sent him to go found the city of Rome, and he needs to get moving. He can't be dallying around here with Dido. So she knows that she's going to have to sacrifice for him. She's going to have to give him up because he's on his mission from his gods. So at the end of the opera, what happens is that Dido builds this huge funeral pyre, a big thing to burn herself on. And she goes on the thing, and they light her on fire and make this big bonfire that is supposed to help Aeneas find his way out of the harbor. So she's going to be his guiding light for the next part of his mission. And this is noble stuff, right? So this is a fairly long story, but it's compressed down. He really only has to deal with the part Aeneas is going to Rome, Dido's the queen, shipwreck, fall in love, big finale. So we can get all that done in an hour. So I want you now to watch a video, not of a production of this, but of just the music itself, of one of the most famous arias from this opera. Remember that an aria is the part where they express their emotion. So she's already decided that she's going to kill herself on this fire, and what she's doing here is singing to her maid about how she wants to be remembered after she's gone. So it's a very moving aria. It's not very long, but it has a unique characteristic that I want you to pay attention to. As you watch the video, you will see that it has the score of the music. This piece is founded over a single bass line that we call a ground bass. And you can see it on the music. So if you look at the bottom line, you'll see that you have the same little line that keeps happening over and over again. It's a little chromatic line that goes da 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 da, something like that. You can forgive my singing. You'll hear it better on the recording. So that thing happens over and over again, something like 15 or 16 times. That same pattern is going to happen over and over. And above it, she's going to sing about her emotions, about giving her life for this man that she loves. So now take a minute and go listen to When I Am Laid in Earth, which is also called Dido's Lament, from Dido and Aeneas. All right, so there you've heard a fairly simple aria over a ground bass sung by a woman as it was intended. But that, as I said, was not the norm. Most of the operas that we see from the Baroque period have all male characters. You may remember that when we talked about Baroque style in general, we talked about the castrato, about these men who had surgically changed themselves so that they could keep their high female-type voices. So, yes, they're now sopranos or mezzos, but they are mezzos and sopranos with big, powerful voices. So you can imagine in that time on a concert stage, and apparently has something to do with the way the testosterone readjusts itself. They were usually like really big, barrel-chested kind of guys. So they were manly-looking guys, but then they would sing and they would have these very different kinds of voices. Weird for us today, perfectly normal at the time. So when you see an opera like that today, obviously we don't have any castrati running around. What usually happens is that they will hire a countertenor to sing. So what's a countertenor? We didn't talk about that when we talked about voice types. A countertenor is just a really high male voice. So it sings up in that soprano sort of range. It has a very different vocal quality than other male voices, but it doesn't sound like a woman either. There's a different quality to it. And as you listen to the example that I've given you, you might just sort of try to focus on that and imagine how that voice is different from a female voice in the same register. So that's one option. We just get a countertenor, and there are some wonderful countertenors out there to be hired, and obviously they would make a good living doing Baroque opera because nobody else can do it. The other option is to hire a woman to sing the man's role. So sometimes when you see Baroque opera, you will see a character like Julius Caesar being sung by a woman. And you have to just sort of say, okay, I'm not thinking about the fact that there's a woman there. I'll just listen to the beauty of the music. So that's typical of the Baroque opera. One of the major composers of Baroque opera throughout Europe was Handel, whom we'll talk about more when we talk about oratorio. We don't think of him as an opera composer these days. We think of him for his other contributions, but he really made quite a good living as an opera composer. So he wrote operas, in many cases like this one, based on historical subjects. So the one that we're going to look at is from Julius Caesar, or to get the full title, Julius Caesar in Egypt, because Caesar got around, right? We're going to focus this on this one particular episode in Caesar's life. So in this, Julius Caesar has come to Alexandria in Egypt. He is, of course, trying to take over the world. That's what Caesar does, right? He is in battle with Pompey, who is another king. Ptolemy decides that he will give a present to Caesar, and that present will be that he's going to kill, Ptolemy? Pompey. He's going to kill Pompey. So he basically presents the head of Pompey to Caesar as a gift when he gets to Egypt. Well, this is not really what Caesar had in mind when he was trying to conquer Pompey. So this is not necessarily the way he wanted things to go. The story involves Cleopatra. There's all sorts of, people killing each other and people having children with each other and whatever. But the part that we're going to look at is an aria that Caesar sings. He has just told Ptolemy that he's not really thrilled about the fact that he killed Pompey. So now he is sort of thinking about that whole process. So the aria that he sings is called Va tacito e nascoto. Got that? So in English, basically what he's singing about, he's saying that if you're a hunter and you're a good hunter, that you don't just come barreling through the bushes and say, here I am. You're sly. You sneak around the edges. And then when you are, when you find your prey, you take him. And then sort of the subtext of that is that he says, and he who is disposed to evil does not wish the deceitfulness of his heart to be seen. So he's kind of a double meaning there. We've got the outer aspect of the hunter who's trying not to be seen by his prey. And then the inner aspect of that hunter is that there's evil in there, and he doesn't want anybody to see that either. So that's what he's singing about in this aria. So I'd like you to take a look now at this excerpt from George Frederick Handel's Julius Caesar in Egypt, where he's singing about being a cunning hunter. This is sung by a countertenor, so you'll have plenty of opportunity to hear that and to see how that works out on the stage. I've given you two versions to watch of this because I want you to understand that even though the stories are very old and the music itself is old, that today people don't always stage them in the same kind of way. So I've given you two productions. One has Caesar in your basic, metal armor, breastplate kind of thing that we sort of think of with Caesar. And the other is done in a more modern kind of style where he wears an army uniform and his assistants are soldiers. So I want you to take a look at both of those, and then you will have had your introduction to Baroque opera.